Acceptance brought to you by Visa.
Yes, it's that time of the week when we discuss digital payment, and today we're looking at some barriers to that payment. And we found out that despite decades of digital transformation, many individuals and businesses, particularly in emerging markets, remain unable to fully participate in digital economy, especially in the rural parts of Nigeria. And we do know that we have larger informal markets here in Nigeria. So barriers to payment acceptance, such as infrastructure, um, infrastructural gaps, security concerns, limited financial literacy, seem to continue to constrain the growth of it. And despite fintech growth, digital payment adoption in the country still faces some barriers like cash preference, weak infrastructure, security concerns, and tackle these would need a digital finance to be unlocked to drive economic progress. And so we'll look at some of these barriers and perhaps get probable solutions to them. And to discuss this, well, we'll talk about fintech. We have the president of Fintech Association, so I'm sure you can answer all our questions this morning. He's also the chief executive officer of Zest Payment, Dr. Stanley Jacob. Dr. Jacob, good morning and welcome to the program.
Good morning, Amy. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. You're welcome. So we've had a lot of attempts. I mean, we have even bodies and associations focusing on financial inclusion to ensure that the spread is accelerated. Not jumping the gun from your perspective, from where you stay as a president of Fintech Association, how good have we been when it comes to financial inclusion?
Wow, thank you, Ini. And I'll say it's a pleasure having to join you this morning to discuss a subject that is very critical to our economic future. I really want to start with that question around our successes. I feel that the stories around our digital payment success is grossly undertold. Because when you look at what the numbers are saying, you take electronic payments, for example, between 2019 and 2022, just 3 years space, we had about 300% growth in electronic payments, and that took us to over 380 trillion in payments. 2 years later, at the end of 2024, we did 3x that figure, and for the first time, we recorded payments exceeding 1 quadrillion in value. I can tell you that many Nigerians never heard of those kind of figures before, in quadrillions. So it wasn't just a victory for payments, but also for our education and literacy. I got to hear that for the first time too. Secondly, when you look at cash, globally, Nigeria has recorded the steepest decline in cash usage across the world. We had about 59% decline in cash usage when you look at a 10-year span between 2014 and 2024. When you move to financial inclusion, a FINA report in 2023 says we are in 64% included, down from 56% included, as in terms of exclusion going down. It might look like a small delta, but when you look at it carefully in terms of the initiatives and execution, the impact is very huge. And looking forward, analysts project that the cumulative growth we would see between 2024 and 2029 is about 23%. So it's all positive. We don't have any country in Africa that have recorded this indicator. So I'm super proud of this.
But isn't that because of the base year? Should we really be proud? We're the giant of Africa, after all. Isn't it because of the issue of like the base year, where we're coming from? So if you look at a country like South Africa, I mean, they don't have such huge change because they have been there even before us.
Yeah, so I will not ever downplay the hurdles that are before us, especially because we're here to discuss hurdles today. We have a lot of challenges. And if you look at payments 15 years back and what it has been today, in terms of the pace of growth, the impact of the growth, and even the velocity and the data recorded, you will see that the impact is more. You would have seen more established markets, very little growth year on year, but we've seen exponential growth in this space. So looking at how we've been able to surmount some of the challenges we recorded, I don't think we can downplay our successes.
But we still have the issue of Infrastructural gaps.
Yes.
Do you see intentionality in closing those gaps?
So talking about the infrastructural gap, today only about 40% of Nigerians have access to reliable internet connectivity. There is this thing about having a two-tiered financial system, urban and rural. So the experience for financial services or internet enjoyment in urban area is very different when you go to the rural areas. So it looks like a two-tiered system. So when you move towards the rural area, on a lighter note, it looks like a 2G or a 1G. That's a problem, and that's why I say we cannot downplay the hurdle. We've also seen progress in the fiber deployment, but a lot of inadequacies around the inland distribution to where the last mile should be. When you look at infrastructure still and you see ATMs, so that it's not just talking about internet, but there's also ATM as an infrastructure for financial services. Today we have just about 17,000 ATMs, and for our population, 60,000 is just the starting point. So we're still very far when you look at these things. And for us to surmount them, we definitely need some sort of strategic investments to expand, and we also will do with some public-private partnership. So yes, the challenges are there, and we need to also commend some of the recent initiatives of the Nigerian Communication Commissions and the Ministry of Communication and Digital Economy, especially as it affects having to deploy broadband connectivity to the 774 local government. I'm very positive about it. I'm optimistic, and I'm hoping to see that when they carry the stakeholders along, it will give the desired impact.
Are they carrying the stakeholders along?
So, to some extent, I think they can still do better, because one thing we always don't do well is carrying the stakeholders along, especially when we have key initiatives like this. But I think they need to carry the stakeholders along, because even when you deploy some of these things, you find out some people say, you still find people in Nigeria say to you, oh, in my area, it's NTN that works. If you go here, it's this telco that works. You know, so we need to carry stakeholders, because there's also that voice of the consumer. There's a voice of the operator. Everyone needs to tell you what will help them work. So you don't just put something and at the end of the day, you're not able to deliver the expected outcome that underlying infrastructure should produce.
And I'm glad you brought in the public sector. And the minister has been really active, at least we've seen him. We've seen also the efforts of ICT centers in communities. Yeah. So other than the hardware, which is the infrastructure itself, there's also the need for skills and knowledge and education, and we do hope to see that also make impact, because, I mean, even if you had the infrastructure and people are not adopting it, then that's another thing. Yeah. Then that brings me to the issue of trust, that there are some Nigerians who still do not trust this system, and so adoption is difficult.
Okay, so thank you very much, Idia. That's a very valid point. There's a strong marriage between literacy and trust when it comes to payment. So first of all, there are just about 36% of adult Nigerians that are financially literate. That's quite low. So that also poses some challenge. And when you look at it, rural, urban demography, you find them mostly in one part of the country. There's another thing about adoption of financial services. Before now, you used to see a lot of complex user interfaces on mobile, online banking, and all that. People find it hard to use these interfaces. But we're seeing operators, banks, fintechs coming up with more interactive and intuitive interfaces, and not just now for transactions, but we're seeing more apps coming out for education. They educate users on what they want to do, the products, before they buy them. That's on that. But when you look at trust, cybersecurity threats, the growing sophistication remains there when you look at the financial service sectors. So we'll continue to be vulnerable because the fraudsters don't sleep. And when you look at it, I don't have that statistics, but a good number of Nigerians have been victims of fraud loss due to financial services. And this tends to impact their trust on the system. And there are a few factors that we can just quickly touch on when it comes to that. One is the chargeback fraud. So when we talk of trust, there is that part on the consumer, there is that part on the operator. they both have to trust each other, because even when you look at the consumer bit, we have consumers that dispute legitimate transaction. So that also creates a kind of gap in terms of trust both ways. There's the issue of data, leakage of personal information, card details, which of course a lot of education is handling, and also low reporting rates. So every time a financial institution reports fraud, there's a scare from the consumer. So that's where trust comes in. They need to be sure that they are safe whenever there is an incident reported. We also have that challenge in Nigeria today where a good number of operators don't like to report what they have faced. So what it does is that it exposes other operators to similar kind of attacks because the learnings learned are not shared. So we think that if we grow in trust and we grow in literacy, there will be a more safe and secure ecosystem for everyone.
And fintech, you guys do have a role to play in this, both, for the consumers and for the players which you are part of, the communication and blurring the line or the divide. I mean, I think fintechs, they do have a whole lot to do.
Yes. As the president of the Fintech Association of Nigeria, I also sit as the vice president for the African Fintech Network for Western Africa. So what we're doing is about getting participation. We're bringing people. Part of what I've done in this administration with my team is to have what we call the communities of practice. So we bring the operators together into different communities of practice, regulatory alignment, cyber security, new technology. So we want people to be able to test and learn new technology. We want them to be able to share best practices on cyber security and also shared infrastructure. Because some of these things that we need to achieve compliance and take us to that place where we have a very safe ecosystem, some of the very tiny or smaller players might not be able to afford them. It becomes very complex and difficult for them. So we think that having those shared infrastructure in National Fraud Center, National Cybersecurity Infrastructure goes a long way. And we are pursuing these initiatives. We made a lot of progress in the past 8 months, actually.
All right, and we hope to see more progress.
Thank you, Ini.
All right, thank you so much. President, Fintech Association and Chief Executive Officer of Zest Payment, Dr. Stanley Jacob, for your time and views.
Thank you, Ini. My pleasure.
Yeah. All right, let's take a break. When we come back, we head to the global scene here on Business Morning. Please stay with us.
Unlocking the future of digital payment. Value of acceptance, brought to you by Visa.